Developing reading habits in general and reading habits, academic reading habits in particular, should be one of the most important goals and or aims of the school education. Unfortunately, in many cases, schools fail in terms of developing students as readers. So, what are the causes that generally school students lack reading habits? We will briefly respond to this question. So the first one is that generally there is lack of facilities, reading facilities in most schools, especially in the developing countries context where schools lack other basic facilities, including facilities for reading such as library or reading places or reading resources and books. So that is like one of the most important reasons for the lack of reading habits among students. Secondly, lack of incentives. So generally, reading is not incentivized in terms of the academic reward or or maybe monetary reward. So there is generally no incentives or rewards for students to help them to develop their reading habits. Thirdly, there is generally curricular overload, which actually means that there is a lot of content and a lot of mundane activities and a lot of preparation for tests, teaching according to tests or exams. And so because of a lot of quantity over quality in terms of the covering of the curriculum, that students find no time for reading, especially for academic or even for pleasure reading. Next, there is generally a premium on grades and marks rather than authentic, in-depth learning and intellectual development of the students. And so schools have a race for marks and grades, and so they are more interested in their students getting higher grades or marks in exams, so they teach to test, and so they are less interested in the importance of reading in terms of developing their students intellectually and academically. And generally, there is this less importance, lesser emphasis on the development or the intellectual development of the students. Then lack of reading role models. Generally, in the school context, role models are in the form of teachers or school leaders. And so when the teachers and the school leaders, they do not present themselves as role models because they too are busy in the day-to-day routine of the schools. So this is something that also hampers students' interest in becoming readers. The next one is, in many cases, students lack reading comprehension, and so they generally have limited vocabulary. Again, this is partly because they do not have the time and inclination and resources to read or to devote time to reading. As a result, they have limited vocabulary, and that, as a result, discourages them to read because of a lack of comprehension, mainly because of a lack of vocabulary. And so this is also one of the main reasons for lack of reading habits among students. The next one is the social or home environment. So generally, in many cases, especially in public sector schools or in schools located in low socio-economic, economically developed areas, many students come from lower socio-economic background where parents are either illiterate or they have less interest in academic kind of stuff such as reading and books. So the home and social environment can also impact students' reading habits. Lack of reading culture in general in the society is on the decline, and one of the biggest reasons is the technological exposure, the distraction, and the information overload are also some of the reasons that leads generally to a lack of reading culture. So there was a time when there were more reading facilities such as local libraries available, and so that culture, the book buying, selling culture, the library culture is generally on the decline. And technology, especially the frequent use of mobiles, is also a kind of proving distraction. So that is also one of the reasons for lack of reading habits. Lastly, lack of reading time and spaces. Again, because of the busy schedules of the educational institutions, and then because of the increasing use of technology, and the time available with the students is kind of now they don't have that much of a time. Again, spaces are not available generally in schools as well, and also at homes or generally in society. So reading spaces or lack of reading spaces is also one of the reasons for the declining reading habits among school students. So there are quite a few reasons or causes of the declining culture of reading habits among students, and that have several consequences as well. So in the next presentation, we will also discuss the consequences of some of the consequences of the lack of reading habits among students, among school students in particular.